All right, guys, let's do a couple of cherries. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Deliberately Creative. I'm Stephanie and I want to welcome you to whatever day it is. It is Acrylic April and we're doing a couple of cherries for the prompt word couple. Because, you know, I'm trying to do things that are not what you expect. So we're doing a couple cherries. These cherries are going on a soft and lovely green background. I have the traceable pattern available for you over on my website. If you're interested in that or any of the materials I'm using, click down below in the more information box. I have affiliate links for all of that stuff, and I also have my regular links to my website. Any way you want to support my channel, I appreciate it. Liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, and, you know, if you have a reason to go and buy stuff on Amazon, if you click my link to my store first and then go to Amazon, I'll get a small finder's fee for sending you there. It helps me keep paint in my studio. Yeah. Anyhow, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really hard to keep up with the days. Now, I have already painted the background with a combination of Prussian blue, permanent green light, and white. And I just mixed that up until I got this pretty minty color. It could have been a little bit lighter. Actually, it was a little bit lighter until it dried, and then it got a little bit darker. So I could have mixed it even lighter, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So I have put out all of my colors. I have permanent red. This is carmine, the permanent yellow deep, the permanent green light, and the Prussian blue, and then I've got some plops of white. I do have black here if we need it in the end, but I'm kind of thinking we're not going to. It is a pretty sea glass green, so it could have been, like I said, even lighter. The original photograph is from Unsplash, and you can see it's a slightly lighter tone, but it's still in that green blue. And when I drew this out, I drew it so I could maybe make this into a little paint by number. We're going to see if that works too at some point. But for now, it's easy to draw. Basically, it's two squishy circles with two lines coming out of them each to make the stems. The stems are joined at the top. So you could draw this without needing any traceables, I'm sure. Let me get these paints out of the way. And we are going to start off by putting a shadow in. We're going to do the shadow first because that's the farthest away thing. And if you look on those cherries, they have a bit of a shadow. Woohoo! I am so glad you guys are all here and watching. I love seeing people showing up in the chat. I love seeing that you guys are chatting. My husband Mark is here. He's in the chat as the moderator. And if you have any questions, he'll come and ask me if I happen to miss your question. What I'm going to do for the shadow is actually take some of that green. Take some of that green. Take some white. Take some blue. And drop my paintbrush and then add a little bit more green because I don't want it to be quite so dark. Oh, maybe I do. And then I need more white because I just want this to be a darker version of what's on the surface here. And if we're looking, the light is coming from the top. So I'm going to go ahead and see about getting this set up so that you can see everything better. So the light is coming from the top this direction, which means that our shadows are down here underneath. Oh, and how I got the cherries on here is I used the Surreal transfer paper. And I just laid that down on top of my 140-pound watercolor paper, and then just traced with a pencil on top of my pattern. There we go. Don't fall. Now, I took me off the screen because I thought you might want to see the palette more than see my face. So there. Trying different things. So I'm looking at this going, all right, the shadow space is right here under the cherry. There's a tiny little rim of light right around the edge of the cherry here, where the shadow is lighter. And then we're going to move over. This is the darkest part of the shadow. We'll make a lighter part in just a second. This shadow is actually coming up a little bit higher. Now, I am using the Acrylic Gouache by Turner. It is a lovely matte finish. It gives you, that matte finish is almost like velvet when it's done. When it's all said and done, that is just, it's so pretty, so soft and velvety. Now with your, I'm taking a little bit more blue into my shadow because I do want it to be a little bit softer. There we go. A little bit softer. How about a little bit more dark for the main part of the shadow? And then there's that softer blurred out bit that's going away. Now there's a bit of shadow underneath of the stem. So I'm going to go ahead and take that right up like this. I'm looking at the reference. It is from Unsplash. There's a bit of the shadow coming out off the edge this way. And unless you have a ton of knowledge of how the shadow lays, you want to have references to show you where the shadows are, to show you where the highlights are. You can guess in certain respects how something lays out, but guessing is never going to be as good as looking at a reference. Like I said, unless you have a ton of knowledge of how those shadows work, I always suggest using a reference. I'm adding a little bit more white to sort of give us that softer, more blurred out edge. Now the background is completely dry, so any of this shadow that I'm putting out here now, this is all wet going on to dry, and it is not always as easy to blend wet into dry. Because when you're using this acrylic gouache, the acrylic gouache actually dries completely, and you can get it wet, but it's not going to relift. So any of my fresh paint that I just put out, I can still move around a little bit because it hasn't cured yet. So I'm trying to soften those edges up just a little with some extra water. The neat thing about gouache is that it has a certain amount of tooth to it, and it kind of grabs onto itself. So even though we have dry paint underneath, I can wet the paint on top and get it to blur out just a little bit. Now, it is not going to look like that dark when it's dry. It's actually going to dry softer. Mostly what you see here is the water on top of the dry paint. I'm just trying to soften out that outside edge just a little bit. We may end up having to darken up that shadow a little, but you know what? It's okay. We may not, because the cherries going on are going to be nice and dark. And hey guys, I want to say thank you to everyone who is who's watching here that are healthcare workers, grocery store workers, people that are frontline, that are considered essential out in public. Thank you so much for all of your work, all of your care, and for putting yourselves in the front line. And I include, in a roundabout way, everybody that's staying home, making sure that everybody else stays safe, and for everybody who's out there sewing masks and giving them away from the kindness of their hearts, or making them just with a tiny little cost to them to cover the materials. Thank you so much for being out there and helping in this time. It's really interesting to, it feels almost like, there's that sort of wartime mentality going on right now, and people are pitching in and helping out. Those of us here on the ground, I'm grabbing some carmine, which is a real purpley pinky red, and a little bit of the permanent red, which is more of a primary red. And I'm going to go ahead and start putting in the darker shadowy bits. I think I'm actually going to take a tiny little bit. Ooh, that Prussian blue with those colors just makes this beautiful, deep, rich, pinky purple color. I think we're going to go ahead, since we can layer our colors, we're going to go ahead and just put that dark shadowy tone, give us that nice black cherry look right now. Look at that. Yum. This is a 3/8 inch flat brush, if anybody's interested. I'm going to put the dark on. We'll let it dry while we put the stems in. Just make sure we get it nice and... It's a squishy circle, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just sort of filling in my lines, my outlines that I had made. Look at that. Ooh, those look yummy already. All right. Well, I'm pretty sure, Angela, that when this is all over, everybody's going to be heading into the hairdressers to get their hair fixed from all their personal hair cutting that they've been doing. I'm taking a little bit of that permanent green light and the permanent yellow deep and making myself a green yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in my stems with that green yellow. And I'm just using that flat brush still. Any of the blue that was on here from the Surreal paper will wash off with a damp brush. Cool thing about that. Yeah. All right. I want a little bit more green in that second one going back. So I do have a picture of my reference up on the computer. And there, okay, that's okay. We're doing okay. Need to put a bit of a highlight of yellow on one edge, like that. See, it's already going in. It's already starting to look. It's already starting to look like cherries. I like that. I like that it's already starting to look right. And now I'm taking just some of the permanent yellow to give me more of that highlight right along the edge, and it's just the permanent yellow. Maybe a touch of white in that now. There we are. Oh, yeah, there. We're just getting some of those little highlights on there. Oh, thank you so much, Chrissy. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everyone who is here and is supporting me, even if you can't support monetarily. Gee, I support you by doing this, and you support me by being here. Coming and sharing your time with me makes a huge difference in my day. I'm taking a little bit of all that yellowy mix and adding a tiny bit of red to it, making sort of a muddy brown kind of color. This is going to just be a little bit more of a natural tone for up here on the top edge. You know, we all find ways to support each other, and that, I think, is what's so cool. I'm just putting a little bit of that brown up at the top. I'm taking a little bit of it and just giving a few spots of it on the stem. Not a ton. The stem is a little bit colored. Every little bit helps. Absolutely. Absolutely. There we go. See, we've got little bits of brown going on here. I might want to take even a little bit more of the dark. Yes, my husband is one of those people who cuts his own hair, but he takes the clippers and just goes at it, which is fine. He's very talented that way. I just put a little bit of Prussian blue into that muddy brown mix. I know my lighting is a little bit, let's see, is that a little bit better? That would be better. That's a little better. All right, so I put a little bit of that Prussian blue into that brown mix so that I can get a little bit more shadow in a couple spots here. But not much. I mean, really and truly, we're not doing this to be realistic. We might get a few little ideas of water drops on here. I'm not sure. So next step, I want to take some of that yellow into my permanent red. That's going to lighten it up without turning it pink. And we're going to go with that highlight space right here. And this is not our high highlight. This is just the first step up. And I'm going to just plop it down on the other cherry here also. See? We're not too worried about making things perfect. Remember, this is acrylic gouache. It's not going to lift up the paint underneath. So we're not blending down through everything. We're just layering. Just layering. I'm going to just get my brush wet. I am going to soften this edge here. There. Soften the edge. With a wet brush. There we go. Yeah, as the days go on, I start losing what day I'm on, especially when it's early in the morning. And I know Sandy was saying that the earlier time is better for her. What's better for you guys? Are the early times or the later times in the day? I've been doing my 9:15 in the morning on Mondays and my 12:15 lunchtime for me on Tuesdays through Fridays for the month of April. But I'm looking at changing up my schedule. If you guys have any suggestions. And now I haven't added any more paint here. I'm just softening it up a little bit around the edges. Remember, dark colors dry lighter, light colors dry darker. Early is better. Early is better. Okay. Okay. You see how by softening it up, I was able to move some of that paint around, and now we've got the dark color starting to show through, but it's not blending through, if that makes sense. So like I want it to maybe be a little bit darker right here. I'm going to move some of that paint around. And get myself back to that slightly darker place. Yeah, that's looking good. That's looking good. I'm taking a little bit of the carmine with the red and adding a bit of yellow to that. And start working on, there's a bit of a highlight. Let's see. Yeah, that's a brighter color. It's a bit of a highlight here. That's brighter. There's that edge that's up here. I need a little more yellow in that, I think. It's not quite bright enough. Ah, there we go. See, brightening up your red is by adding yellow to it. Okay. And then we've got sort of a reflected highlight showing up down low. And there's a bit of a reflected highlight showing up in here. Yeah, I'm feeling this one. This one is making me happy. So let's see. Pull it back a little so you can see the whole thing. That's doing pretty well. I'm not going to mess around with the shadow up here. The shadow here under the cherries, I think, needs to be a little bit darker still. It's still a little too light. So let's go ahead and add a little more shadow there. It's a cool thing. We can do that. We can go and add our shadows back in. And it doesn't bother me that I've been using red and using green, because, you know, the red can be used to gray out. There we go. That's a darker color. So, the darkest dark shadow. Right like that. And the darkest dark shadow on this one is right here. Comes out just a little bit. And then we'll soften it up. So it's 5:40. I've got lots of people in the UK, don't I? Because here it is 9:40 in the morning. So it's like the beginning of my workday when you guys in the UK are just sitting down to evening tea. And I'm just softening up that color. And softening it up here too. I will say that working at the table this way, I'm still trying to figure out the height that I need to be sitting at. I think I've got this worked out for you guys to be able to see now. Now it's just me figuring out my position so that I'm not stressing my shoulder, because I'm kind of hunching up a little bit. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just sort of take and lightly sort of stipple that color out. The brush has sort of spread apart a little bit. So I'm just stippling it. And that, you know, that's a little bit stronger than the shadow would normally be. And you can soften this out. So I probably will do that. But this gets me the color out there without being quite so harsh. So now I can soften that out. And I'm just patting it to soften that out now. I'm not trying to actually get a real airbrushed effect, but it would be kind of nice to have it just blur out a little bit. If I had done the background at the same time, I could have probably gotten away with doing a wet watercolor type effect for that shadow, and it might have been a bit more effective. So, but I wanted the background dry so that we could get into painting the cherries, because that's what everybody's here for. So now we're going to go back in. I've let those cherries dry. I'm going to add more yellow to my red mix and get it much more orangey. And we're going to get that higher highlight going on here and going on right there. Yeah, maybe even a bit more yellow. Maybe even a touch of white into that. I don't want it to go too peachy, but I do want it to be a brighter highlight. There we go. That's better. There's a bit there. We're making this pretty painterly and definitely more of a colorist type of way of doing this, with all these different colors going into a cherry. Okay. A little tiny touch here and there. And now something that, if we want to go and put a little bit of that darker, the water drop kind of look in here. The water drops are actually right on top of our regular color. Let's see if we can zoom in that, because if we're doing water drops, you need to be able to see them. Sorry, I'm moving my screen around there. Let's see. Well, that's a little bit bigger. And oh, I see what my situation here is with the shadow. Okay. See, the shadow was bothering me. It's because it needs to come around a little bit farther. There we go. It's like the shadow needs to come farther around. See, sometimes you have to look at something and think, what is wrong? What do I need to do to make it right? There. That makes it feel a little bit too much. A little bit too much. We'll just work it around. It does need to be around, but that was a little bit too much. This is going to dry, and there's not going to be a problem. This one needed to come around, definitely. There we go. All right. Okay, so I want to go ahead and put a little, just a couple little water drops in. So what I'm going to do is take my red on a small brush with a bit of the blue, that Prussian blue. It's going to be very, very dark, but it's still red. And we are going to put, because the light's coming from up here, there's going to be a little shadow. Just do like 3 on that one. And maybe we'll put a little water drop up here. So there's the shadow on the underside. There's the highlight on the top side. So now we're going to take that kind of orangey color, maybe a touch of white in it. So then there's the highlight on the top side. Water drops work best when you've got something underneath. But look at that, it's already starting to look like a water drop. Now I'm trying to look at my reference here. So I can really see, yeah. We've got our little water drops. Tiny bit of some white. Pardon me. To give us down on the shadow edge, right above it, there's a little highlight from the light that's coming through that water and bouncing around inside. I want to soften that just a smidge. See, look at that. And then there's a little bit of a reflected light outside of those water drops, outside the shadow. Kind of coming through, lensing through that. And then that really gets softened up because it's just barely visible. Just a little bit. What do you think about that? I think that's looking pretty good. We're going to go in with a bit of the pinky red, just to give it a little bit of a different tone on here. This is sort of our little surprise. Not a lot of it, but it's that shadowy area that's reflecting a little bit of light, but it's not too bright. The tiny details, sometimes the tiny details just give you that extra spark. So I mean, we're pretty much done with this, I think. You know, I didn't want to burden us with too much for a Monday morning or Monday evening, depending on where you are in the world. Let's see, we need a little bit of that pinky bright up here. And right here, we're just going to let that blur down just a little bit. And I'm going to soften these guys up just a smidge. And yeah, I tend to be a little bit harder on my brushes. If you are somebody who really, really presses hard on your brushes, make sure you're using synthetic bristles or synthetic filaments. They will be a bit more resilient than natural hair brushes. If all you've got are your good watercolor brushes, just take care of them. Wash them really well. There we go. That sort of glossy shine going off on there. Thank you so much. Let's get this signed really quick. Let's see, what are we going to sign it with? Maybe I'll sign it with a bit of a green yellow. So that way it's going to show up, but it's not going to get it nice and juicy. It's going to show up, but it's not going to be too bright. It'll dry. It'll look better here in just a second. Now we're going to go ahead and pull the tape off. So let's go to that wider view on the desk. I want to say thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure that you have clicked that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends. Now remember, I say it every time, but especially since I'm using reused tape, where the paint flows underneath, you can just take your white gouache and you can paint right over it. I'm not going to do that for this whole frame right now, but just to show you, you can just use your white gouache to take care of that. There we go. See, you guys are going to be able to head on over to the Art Sherpa and have a fun time with her couple of birds. I hope that you'll come back and check out my next video. It's a lovely sunset boats, and we will be doing that at 12:15 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time tomorrow. Thank you, and remember, go out and do something creative. Take care of yourself so you can take care of those around you. And I hope to see you back here again really soon. Bye-bye.